So yesterday we have started to look at the category of finite dimensional Okay, so it's tensor category, and I want to emphasize the fact that we use a Drinfeld-Gilbert coproduct in opposition to the coproduct of the previous talk, which is a topological coproduct. So we use for the delta, which is a Drinfeld-Gilbert coproduct. And so I finished yesterday with a theorem of classification of simples. If you remember, so simples are parameterized by n tuple of polynomials. So it's polynomials. N is the rank of G. Okay, so polynomials normalized with constant term equal to 1. And so in particular, we had the fundamental modules, which corresponds to trivial polynomials, so of degree 0, except one which is of degree 1. So these are the fundamental modules. Okay, and so one important point here, that as in the previous talk, here we have the phi generator, so the Cartan analog, the loop analog of Cartan. So here we have, so I try to be consistent with the notation of the previous course, so phi ID. Okay, and in you can look at the formal properties of this. This matches, this is as in the previous talk, so some of the Drinfeld generators. So, so one thing I have not explained yesterday is the meaning of this polynomial. So let me. So this is what we saw yesterday. So as a remark, so in fact this polynomial encodes some eigenvalues of these generators on some highest weight. So
that do you take type 1 in some sense orientation? So either some condition of type 1? Or
yes, so this is what I said yesterday. So all representation are of type 1. So by representation I mean type 1, meaning that the eigenvalues of the ordinary Cartan are powers of Q without a sign. That's type 1. The ordinary Cartan, in fact, so phi I0 plus is Ki, analog of Chauvel generators of the finite type Cartan. So, so the first remark is that so this encodes, so these polynomials encodes the eigenvalues so on the the phi I plus on the highest weight vector. So highest weight vector in the sense of the weight space decomposition for the Ki, the ordinary Cartan. Highest weight vector of the simple module. We look at so this formal power theory on a highest weight vector, so V. So then it is obtained as an expansion rational fraction. So pi is our polynomial, so we construct a rational fraction by taking the quotient, and we shift the variable of the polynomial by a power of q, but not the same power of q here and here. So we have a rational fraction, and we expand in z, in positive z, so as it was explained by Sasha, the way we expand is important. So here we expand in z, and we get the formal power series in z, so a collection of complex numbers. And these complex numbers are the eigenvalues of the terms of this generating series. So in some sense, this rational fraction is more important than the polynomial itself, from this point of view, because this is where you can read the eigenvalues. So this will be important for us later. So in some sense, alternatively, we could say that the simple modules are parameterized by this collection of rational functions instead of the polynomial. Yes, so to have the parameterization, we do not need the phi I minus, I plus minus, but in fact, the phi I minus, the eigenvalues are given by the same rational fraction, but extended in z minus 1. In some sense, it's a redundant information. But it's true. So you have two expansion, and the two make sense. Okay, so that's first remark. Second remark is that, so this is what happened on the highest weight vector, but we have more weight vectors, and the study of the generalized spectrum of these operators is given by what is called Q character. It will appear later today. So let's say generalized spectrum on the wall. So is included in what is called I will not discuss this much in my lectures, but this is an important part of the theory, and which will appear, for example, in Bernard talk this afternoon. So there is a character theory which encodes the spectrum of this generating series in an analog way to the usual character theory, but there are some technical difficulties. In particular, these operators do not act diagonally in general on the representation. So we have, instead of taking eigenspaces, we have to look at generalized eigenspaces. And so that's the second remark. The third remark. So I mentioned yesterday evaluation morphism, and in fact, so for type A, these fundamental modules are evaluation. Write for SL2. For G SL2, so the fundamental module here is an evaluation module of dimension 2. Evaluation. Okay, so it's a pullback of two-dimensional representation of UQSL2. Of the circle. Two-dimensional UQSL2. By DA. So this is the evaluation of So So for each complex number, you have evaluation morphism, and so you obtain a continuous family of two-dimensional that are not isomorphic one to each other. So it's a kind of a toy example, but already quite interesting to see some phenomena. I think in the exercise class yesterday, so it was already discussed. So maybe some tensor product of this module. So maybe I can make some additional comments on this. Maybe first comment. So this is the exercise. So for those of you who were not in the exercise class yesterday, so we know when this tensor product is simple. In fact, it's simple if and only if. So the quotient of the spectral parameter is not Q2 minus 2. So it is generically simple. There are two kind of critical values, Q2 and Q minus 2, so that tensor product is not irreducible. So in particular, if A is equal to B, the tensor square is simple. So you see that, and this is something we discussed yesterday, so see some examples here of representation whose tensor square is irreducible. So for example, V1, so this is simple. And so in the case when it's not irreducible, so this representation, these four-dimensional modules, is not isomorphic in fact. So that's an example of you have a defect of braiding here. These two modules are not isomorphic. And so in fact, it's not simple. In fact, it's not semi-simple. It's a module of length 2. And so that's a well-known example. So you have a unique a way how to prove they are not isomorphic. In fact, this one has a unique non-trivial submodule, and it's of dimension 1. And this one has a unique non-trivial submodule, it's of dimension 3. So that's a way to see that they are not isomorphic. So this one is trivial. And this one is an evaluation module of dimension 3. And in fact, its Drinfeld polynomial is just 1 minus ZA, 1 minus Z. So the product of the two Drinfeld polynomials of these two representations. So that's something, in fact, that I guess you computed yesterday. And in fact, this module, which appear as submodule here, is here the quotient. So you have short exact sequence like this, and in fact, it reversed here the one-dimensional module here, which is a submodule, is the quotient of this four-dimensional module by this three-dimensional. So this is consistent with the fact that the Grothendieck ring is commutative. In the Grothendieck ring, the two classes are the same. So the class of W plus the class of 1, but in the category they are not isomorphic. So we have the it is an example of an exchange relation from the because it's more systematically. But you see here that it appears when we have a defect of symmetry of the tensor product. Okay, so so what I want to do now, maybe discuss a bit more systematically what happens for SL2. So this is something that can compute it by hand quite easily.
So when you know the action of the phis on the loop highest weight vector, is there a nice expression for the action on each other extremal weight vector?
Yes, so the extra and weight spaces will be of dimension 1 as well. And then it can be expressed in terms of what is called Sharil breadgroup action. So you have breadgroup action on Drinfeld polynomials, or maybe some y variable of q characters. And you can compute all extremal models. This is understood. But then for non-extremal weight spaces, it's more complicated.
And they're still like balanced rational functions?
Yes, the action of phi I plus is rational.
Yeah.
On not only the eigenvalues, but the operator itself is rational. Because you have off diagonal term, this is known to be rational. Yeah, it's not completely trivial. Okay, so let's say more on C for UQLSL2. So for SL2, in fact, we know a lot, much more than in for general types. And we have a very explicit description of all simple modules. And so there is something which is true for SL2 and not true for other types, is that all simple modules can be described in terms of evaluation modules. So, so we have for each n. So we have evaluation modules. So we have let's say L n of L. So it's evaluation modules from the n+1 simple modules of UQLSL2. So obtained. By evaluation, as we did for the fundamental. And so there is the following theorem, again of Chargain and Prestel. Theorem that says that any simple modules can be factorized as a tensor product of such representation. So any is isomorphic. To tensor product of some of these. So I insist this is not true for SL3, for example. But for SL2 we have this thing. So it means that so V okay. So some remark about this. So this factorization, in fact, is unique up to the order of the factor. It is can be, so once you know it's simple, then this tensor factor commute, and but then the multiplicity, the powers is unique. And a second remark, in fact, not all such tensor products are reducible. So there is some combinatorics coming into the picture. It depends on the I and the A. So as we have seen for this very particular example for SL2, this one is not simple. So there is some combinatorics coming into the picture to know when it's simple. So it's not simple. For any direction of but so there is there is a complete characterization of it can be seen as some kind of shadow of cluster algebra in this theory.
It is simple only if and only if there are no two AI and AJ that have like this resonance condition with Q square.
So I will explain. It's slightly more complicated, but it is in this. So this is what I'm about to explain. Okay, so this is explained in terms of what are called Q segments. So this is so for okay. So let consider the following. So A1 so for each of these evaluation modules, for each L and A, so we consider the following set of complex numbers. So in fact, it is a set of the inverse of the roots of the Drinfeld polynomial of this representation. Inverse the Drinfeld polynomial of L and A. And then, so this is what is called sometimes a Q segment.
So how many elements you have in this set?
You have n elements.
So 3 minus n. So that makes sense.
Sorry?
So it should be 3 minus n exponent in the second.
So yes, sorry, yes. So for if you have just a fundamental module, you adjust just. And so now there is a definition of what is called general position. So if you consider two Q segments, are said to be in general position. If what? So if the union of sigma 1 of sigma 2 is not a Q segment, or sigma 1 is included in sigma 2, or for example, A and AQ2 are not in general position because the union is a Q segment. And now the theorem is that the following. So if you consider tensor product like this, so N1, N1, so is simple. So if and only if, all the Q segments here are in general position. So sigma of n in general position. For any G and G prime. So this is a complete combinatorial answer to this question, when this tensor product is irreducible. And in fact,
How do you define general position for several? Because you define for two.
I define for two, but the condition now is 2 by 2.
For any pair.
For any pair, yes. So that's in fact an important point. It means that you can read the simplicity of this tensor product by looking just 2 by 2.
Yeah.
Simple group. So it's the point. Okay, so this is in some sense a generalization of the statement I gave for fundamental modules. Well, you add these two fundamentals, so two complex numbers. They are in general position if and only if the quotient is not Q2 or Q minus 2, according to this definition. Yes?
The inclusion on the right on the definition, so sigma 1 and sigma 2, is it strict or can be unequality?
No, the Q segment is in general position with itself. So that's also an important point. It means that the tensor square of a simple module is simple. So let me do some remark.
So a tensor square is not simple.
It is. Yes. So the consequence. If you take V simple, implies that V tensor V is simple.
Then the union is.
So if V is simple, so it means that it's a tensor product like this with all two segments in general position. But now if you take another tensor product of the same form, the pairs, again, all the pairs are in general position. So the condition is satisfied.
And so just formally speaking, like if sigma 1 is equal to sigma 2,
Yes,
they are not in general position.
they are in general position because this is satisfied. this is not and, it is or.
Ah. Okay.
Maybe let me give the example of fundamental modules to clarify. So if you take so V1 tensor V1 on this simple that we have discussed previously. So this is equivalent according to this theorem to say that the singleton A and B are in general position. So if you look at this definition, this means that AB is not the union of 2 is not a Q segment, so it means that A is not equal to B. So that's the only situation where this is not satisfied. Okay, and this is exactly what the condition I explained. That's a particular case. So this condition, so I want to insist, this is true only for SL2. It's for general types, there are examples of simple finite dimensional modules whose tensor square is not simple. Okay, and for third point. So we may wonder what happens when you have two Q segments that are not in general position. So if not in general position. So then again by Shari Presley, it's found that the tensor product of the two corresponding modules is of length 2. So then so let's say this is so for the notation we will let's notation. So if sigma is sigma in A, usually we can denote L sigma. This is L. You have a bijection here between these evaluation modules and the collation of Q segments. So if they are not in general position, so then L of sigma 1 is of length 2. So, and we can write explicitly the decompositions. So you have and the intersection. Plus some simple terms. That can be explicitly described. So there is a relation which looks the same as what I wrote for fundamental modules. The same sum of two terms, and the two terms can be factorized again in terms of these simple modules. Okay, so now what we would like to do now is to understand this more systematically and also for other types. And it appears that cluster algebra is a good framework to understand this.
Can you push the board up?
Sorry?
Can you push the board?
Yes. So I insist again, there is no such description for all types. In fact, one open question, for example, for SL3 is a factorization of any simple modules in terms of prime module. So prime modules are simple modules that cannot be factorized again, as this one. So for SL2, thanks to this result, there is a complete description of factorization of simple modules into prime module. We know it's unique and we know how to describe it. For SL3, it's an open question. In fact, for SL3, I think it's not known if the factorization is unique, even for SL3. So what we want to do is not to give a complete answer to this problem, but still we can get many information in the same flavor using cluster theory. So this is what I want to explain. So let's understand this from cluster. we discussed yesterday. So to do it, I will recall the what are cluster algebras. With some examples. Yes.
Just for us, it's important to be square or like any power also.
Any powers. Yes. Any tensor power of a simple finite dimensional UQ LSL2 module. That will be a crucial point of view for the cluster theory. So that's something again that you do not see in the classical representation theory of simple Lie algebra, for example, where you just have this property for a trivial module. And for UQG, where Q is generic but G finite dimensional, also you don't see.
Sorry, this simple module on the right here.
Yes.
Can you determine?
Yes. So in fact, it's so this simple module is tensor product of again two evaluation module. And you can describe explicitly sigma 5 and sigma 6. So you have to take the union of sigma 1 and sigma 2. You add the closest neighbors, so q minus 2, q minus 2. And then you remove the intersection, and you have two connected components. And these are sigma 5 and sigma 6. So
Just sigma 1 set minus sigma 2 and sigma 2 set minus sigma 1.
sorry?
I mean, the two just sigma 1 set minus sigma 2 and sigma 2.
You have to, I think you have to add the neighbors of the Q segment.
This is equality in K theory, but not as modules.
Sorry?
Isomorphism not of modules, but in K theory this is.
This is in
Yeah.
this relation. So this tensor product is not semi-simple in general, as we have seen, but you can write an exact sequence. So you can, as I did for fundamental modules, and one will appear as a quotient, the other one as some module, and the way how they appear depends on the order of the two. It's known since maybe 30 or 35 years ago by Charibot.
91. 91.
91, okay.
Very impressive.
So 35 years. Thank you. So much before cluster algebra. So now let's discuss cluster algebras. Forming the unity. Okay, so we consider a Q quiver. So a cluster algebra is defined from a quiver, and so we assume that there are no loops. So it's a general quiver, finite or infinite, but no loops and no two cycles. Okay, and so this quiver has a set of vertices, and the vertices will be separated in two families. One will be called frozen and some unfrozen. And we will distinguish some which will be called unfrozen. Okay, so for example, so let's consider a quiver like this, and I will denote by a square, so that's a standard notation as yesterday already. These two are frozen vertices, and these two are not. So that's a notation. maybe we could say mutable sometimes. Maybe yes. Terminology for this one. So now what is cluster algebra associated to Q? So AQ. So depends on AQ. So it is a subalgebra of the field of rational fractions with variables parameterized by the set of vertices of Q. Just a field of rational fraction. And so it's a subalgebra. So generated by what are called cluster variables. So generated. Cluster variables. So cluster variables are certain distinguished rational fractions in this field. And so these cluster variables are defined by some inductive process from the generator of the field. So defined by an inductive process. So we start with the xi, so which are sometimes called the initial cluster variables. So initial. And together with the quiver Q, they form what is sometimes called the initial seed. So initial. So that's the collection of these variables. Together with the quiver, Q. And then there is what is called mutation. So it's a way to produce new cluster variables from this one and from the quiver. So then there is. So mutation is, there is a mutation at each vertex which is not frozen. So each mutable vertex. That's mutable. So what we do is that we just modify the cluster variable attached to this vertex. The other ones are not modified. So we produce a new. We produce a new cluster variable. So the way it's defined, so we multiply the new one by the old one, And so there is this formula, so it's equal to a sum of product of all cluster variables, so Fg, and the product are separated into depending on the arrows that are incoming or outgoing to Fg. So this is called an exchange function. Okay, so we separate the cluster variable here depending on the quiver, on the form of the quiver, if the row are incoming or outgoing, and then we obtain a new rational fraction. So the mutated seed. So we obtain a new seed. Well, so we keep all the x. And we, so the xi0 is replaced by the new cluster variable here. And the quiver gets also modified. And Q. I will give an example in a few minutes. And so then we can do this on all vertices and iterate. And in fact, and it will produce new rational fractions. And in general, infinitely many rational fractions, because this mutation in general do not commute. And so we look at all these rational fractions, and this is the definition of the cluster algebra, the algebra generated by all. So we repeat. At all possible vertices, at all mutated. And we obtain many. Okay, so already we see that a cluster algebra is more than an algebra. It's an algebra with a distinguished set of generators, the cluster variables. And in addition, these generators come by clusters, so by grouped, because at each step we have a family of cluster variables. Okay. So this is an important point, because it allows to define what is called the cluster monomial.
In this procedure, you get a finite number, so it's always the same quiver. So it's a finite number of quivers which are in gold. Yes. So
No. It could be infinite. The vertices will not change, but the arrows.
you create new arrows?
It may happen that we create new arrows, and the number of arrows can explode.
Number of arrows can explode.
Yes.
There could be multiple.
There could be
So
multiple
the
arrows.
vertices remain the same, but the arrows you got
Yes.
number of arrows go infinitely. Yeah?
It depends on the. It could be. There could be a finite number of quiver. It depends on the initial quiver.
Yeah.
But there could be also infinitely many.
And the number of vertices is finite, or it doesn't matter?
Well, we will. It does not matter. So we will use quivers with infinitely many vertices. But if there is a finite number of vertices, the number of cluster variables might be infinite, and the number of quivers might be infinite. In fact, it's infinite. it's kind of very specific quiver. It's related to classification of Dynkin diagram. So this is one of the first results of Fomin-Ziewiński, the series, to know for which quiver you get a finite number of cluster variables. And quite surprisingly, it's related to the ADE classification of Dynkin diagram. So which, a priori, you don't see any group or any Dynkin diagram, but
sorry, but even if you have an infinite number of vertical vertices, you will always have a finite number of arrows going into or out of a given vertex.
Yes. We that's something we assume. It's locally finite. It's called locally finite.
The condition that there are no two cycles, is it preserved?
It is preserved. And also, something I have not said, the mutation process is involutive. If you mutate again at the same vertex, you go back. So this is, if you look at this relation, it's quite. Yes?
In principle, it depends on the order of mutation, right?
Yes, if you start with one seed and you do a sequence of mutation, if you do the same sequence of mutation but you have changed the order, you get something completely different.
But then I guess it's a proposition that the whole cluster algebra will be independent.
The whole cluster algebra, by definition, is generated by all cluster variables in all possible sequences of mutations. Yes, all possible sequences of mutations. You get many seeds, and you look at all cluster variables, and this is the cluster. By definition, the cluster variable. So it depends only on the quiver, on the choice of the mutable vertices. So maybe if you never seen it, I can give an example. But yes, just want to say one important point again, that the cluster variables come by groups, clusters, and there is this important notion of cluster monomial, which is a monomial of cluster variables from the same seed. In cluster from the same seed. So let me give an example. What is done usually when you do a course of cluster algebra is take the A2 quiver. It's quite already thing. So if you are familiar with the theory, I'm sorry because you know already this, but I think it's quite good to look at this one. So here you have two vertices, two initial cluster variables, and two possible mutations. So let's mutate here. So if you look at the exchange relation, it should be x1 star x1. And here you have one outgoing arrow, which will produce x2, no incoming arrow, so plus 1. So when you mutate, you keep x2, and then x1 is replaced by 1 plus x2 divided by x1. You get a new cluster variable. And in this case, the rule is very simple, you just reverse the arrow. So that's a new seed. You can do the same here. So we mutate here, so we keep x1. Again, so here it's quite symmetric. You get x1 plus x1 divided by x2. And the arrow is reverse. So this is what you obtain when you mutate here. So now, if I take this quiver, if I mutate here again, I will go back to this seed. Now I can mutate here. So if I mutate here, I will have x2 star, so the new cluster variable multiplied by x2. So now I have again 1, but plus this cluster variable. So the new cluster variable, what it is, it's 1 plus x2 divided by x1, x2. X2 star here. And so maybe I should keep some space. So this is the replacement for this cluster variable. Again, the quiver euro is reversed. And you keep this cluster variable here. So now we can do the same here if we mutate here. And so you can check, and that's something quite remarkable, that you get the same rational fraction here. And then the arrow is reversed. that's the seed that you obtain here by mutating here. And now, so we are here. If we mutate here, we go back here. But if we mutate here, in fact, so if you compute, you have a new. So what it should be, you should multiply by 1 plus x2 plus x1. So it should be equal to 1 plus x2 plus x1 divided by 1 x2. And in fact, this relation is satisfied by this fraction. So it means that when you mutate here, you get this. And that's the case here, so it's a well-known case, where you get a finite number of cluster variables, a finite number of cluster. There is some kind of periodicity here. So you get, in this case, 5 cluster variables. So the cluster algebra is the algebra generated by x1, x2, 1 plus x2 divided by x1. This is a cluster algebra associated to this A2 quiver. Okay. 5 cluster variables, 5 clusters also. So that's a bit coincident. In general, the number of clusters isn't the same as the number of.
When we said, so you don't consider one polynomials of this variable.
Sorry?
You don't consider inverses of them.
Ah, no. That's the algebra. So something that you can, so there is a notion, yesterday there was this Laurent polynomial which we have discussed. Something you can observe, so it's a little example, but all cluster variables are Laurent polynomial in the initial cluster variable. So a priori, when you mutate, you can get very complicated rational fraction, but still it's a Laurent polynomial. So that's a very general phenomenon, which is called Laurent phenomenon. It's a theorem of Fomin-Zielinski. That, for any cluster algebra, this is true. You start with a seed, and the cluster algebra will be a sub-algebra of the Laurent polynomial in the initial cluster variables.
Which one did you mutate on the last two?
Sorry?
Which vertex did you mutate?
Well, the one that I can mutate, so this one.
Oh, but then the second one should be...
No, the arrow swaps, but then you...
Yes, so there is something. So when you mutate here, the arrow will go like this. So you get this seed.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
But cluster monomers, do they form bases?
So in this case, yes. So there is also a general theorem, I think by Caldero and Keller, which says that cluster monomials are linearly independent. It's a non-trivial theorem. In general, they do not form a basis of the cluster algebra. But when the number of cluster variables is finite, then it forms a basis, and it is the case here. So if you look at, so you have here 5 families of cluster monomials. Monomial is x1, x2. Monomial in x2 multiplied by this one, and they form a basis of this. That's something you can check by hand in this.
The union of these monomials forms a basis.
Sorry?
So the
union of cluster monomials in this case
forms a basis.
In general, it's a free.
You exclude the trivial monomials.
Well, the trivial monomial.
Because you have intersection.
You may have cluster monomials, of course.
Which come up.
For example, the powers of
power
of x1 are also cluster monomials here and here.
Okay.
But in general, so they form, they are linear independent, but they don't generate. They generate some smaller algebra.
Some subspace, not sub. Well, the subalgebra generated by cluster monomials is the whole cluster algebra.
Of course.
Because it's generated just by cluster variables.
So just subspace.
Just a subspace. So you see that we started here by an A2 with a quiver whose underlying graph is A2, and we get a finite number of cluster variables. So that's a particular case of the classification by Fomin-Zielinski of what they call cluster algebra finite type, meaning with a finite number of clusters. And the theorem is that if a quiver is mutation equivalent to a quiver whose underlying graph is of type ADE, then there is a finite number of cluster variables. That's a particular case of this. Okay, so it's a bit, so there is it's a very well developed theory, so it's a bit sketchy presentation. At least we have it's relatively easy to define. So, yes, so maybe I can state first theorem in the case of LS. So we now let's go back to I have 5 minutes. And so what do I want to state? Yes. So let's we consider a sum-monoidal category. So let's what we call CL. So I take L, let's say larger than 1. So the monoidal subcategory generated by so I take some fundamental module. So I take V1 of 1, V1 of Q2 up to V1 of Q is 1. So I pick up L plus 1 fundamental modules. And I look at CL, so the smallest monoidal subcategory containing this L plus 1 object. So its Grothendieck ring is quite easy to describe. So it's a sub-ring of the Grothendieck ring of the whole category, and in fact it's a polynomial in L plus 1 variable, narrated by this one. It's one of Q L. So as a ring, we understand it very well. It's a polynomial in but of course it's a Grothendieck ring, so it's more than a ring. We know in addition that there is a basis of simples here. And in this case, it's SL2. We have all these combinatorics I explained of Q segment by Shary-Presley. So we can describe explicitly, in this case, the basis of simples. And so using this, so that's something. In fact, we can understand the combinatorics in this case easily in terms of this cluster algebra. So that's an example that we had looked at with in 2010, some years ago now. That in this is in fact isomorphic to a cluster algebra. So for a certain quiver QL, so this quiver QL is linear quiver. With one frozen L mutable vertices and one frozen. So we have this, but in addition, here you have the basis of simple. And as we have discussed here, we have the cluster monomial. So this quiver, of course, is a type A quiver. And so it corresponds to, as I said, the cluster algebra of finite type. So there is a finite number of cluster variables. And the cluster monomial form a basis of the cluster variable. And in fact, the point is that it's compatible. So if you look at cluster monomial here, so this isomorphism defines a bijection between the basis of cluster monomial here and the basis of symbols. So simple classes. Again, it can be seen as a reformulation of the Charey-Presley combinatorics in terms of this terminology of
Did you explain that simple classes are always simple classes always form bases, yeah?
Yes.
In case what you explained, cluster monomial is not always form.
in this case, yes, because this quiver is a quiver of type A. In this case, it's true. Let me just point out something. So we discussed the fact that here the tensor square of representation are simple, and it's coherent with the fact that the square of cluster monomial is a monomial. Because the cluster monomial is by definition monomial in cluster variable from the same seed. So the square should be simple. So if you want this to be true, you need here simple classes with this property. And for SL2, it's known that it's true for all simple classes. So this is coherent with this. So, yes, so I stop here for today. And what I want to do tomorrow is to see what happens for more general algebra, so more general quantum-Pluper algebra, where we do not have such a nice understanding here of the combinatorics.
Thank you very much.